opportunities, such as how to operate more sustainably. By reauthorizing this agency, we have the opportunity to modernize the BDA for today's challenges, improve its ability to foster economic growth, and build resilient supply chains. Specifically, the Economic Development Reauthorization Act makes key reforms to update EDA's core programs. It authorizes activities to support workforce development, disaster assistance, broadband deployment, and renewable energy, among other activities. So why is this important? Well, I want to really paraphrase one of my favorite, probably one of all of our favorite presidents, Abraham Lincoln. We used to be asked, like, what is the role of government? He'd say the role of government is to do for the people what they cannot do for themselves, and that's what we're up to today. Some communities across our country don't have the resources and support that they need to thrive in the 21st century. Over the past 2 decades, some factory towns have seen their last plant close and are seeking to attract new industries. And some cities are looking to reinvent themselves to compete on a global scale. The EDA plays a central role in helping communities turn economic adversity into opportunity. Next, we'll consider the America's Conservation Enhancement Reauthorization Act of 2024, also known as the ACE Act. Several members of our committee joined Senator Capito and me in introducing this bipartisan legislation last month. It will reauthorize important habitat and wildlife conservation efforts throughout our country. Wildlife conservation is, as you know, a shared responsibility between federal government, state government, and many stakeholders, including hunters, anglers, wildlife watchers. The ACE Act reauthorizes programs that bring these stakeholders together, including the North American Wetlands Conservation Act Grants Program, the National Fish and Wildlife Federation, and the Chesapeake Bay Program. It also addresses the threats of emerging wildlife diseases like chronic wasting disease, protects livestock from predators, and combats invasive species. Finally, we'll consider the Legacy Mines Cleanup Act of 2024, introduced by Senators Kelly and Senator Lummis. This bill would codify in law the EPA's Office of Mountains, Deserts, and Plains, which was established in 2020. The EPA's Office of Mountains, Deserts, and Plains serves as a Western land-focused office to address issues particularly to those regions, including the cleanup of abandoned hard rock mines. Specifically, the office provides oversight for federal hard rock mine cleanup sites west of the Mississippi River, serves as a central contact for other federal agencies, for states, for tribes with responsibility for these sites, and develops management approaches to address legacy pollution. Let me stop and recognize the ranking member, Senator Capito, for any opening remarks that she had. I might just say, I say oftentimes in this committee, bipartisan solutions are lasting solutions. We have a great partnership here, and it goes across party lines. I just want to thank everybody for working hard and as a team to get us to this point today. Thank you, Senator Capito.
Thank you, Senator Carper, and thanks for holding the business meeting, but also thanks for the good hard work. I want to thank you and your staff for working diligently with me and my staff on these bipartisan bills, and we've been talking about this one for a while, so very pleased we're at this point that we could partner on 3891, the Economic Development Reauthorization Act of 2024. I'm especially pleased that I have 7 of my regional planning and development council folks here from West Virginia, so why don't you guys stand up and so we can give you a little round of applause. And you might recall Shane Whitehair was one of our, he's here with us today. He was one of our witnesses when we began looking into the reauthorization of this. So thank you all for coming. As we know, the EDA is tasked with facilitating economic development and creating jobs in distressed communities across the country, extremely important in our state. With EDA programs, they receive annual appropriations from Congress. It's been since 2008 since we have reauthorized this. It expired then. The legislation reauthorizes these programs at fiscally responsible levels for the fiscal years 2025 to 2029. It reasserts congressional direction over EDA funding decisions, enhances our oversight of the agency, preserves locally driven economic development decisions, and ensures that funding from EDA is accessible to distressed communities. It also codifies and authorizes dedicated funding for EDA's Assistance to Coal Communities program, which was one of my top programs for the legislation. This program ensures that communities in my home state of West Virginia and also Pennsylvania as well, which were decimated by the downturn of the coal industry, have the resources they need to recover and grow. It also reauthorizes the regional commissions that were expiring or have already expired. It expands the type of activities that those commissions can carry out in their communities and modernizes their administrative requirements. This legislation incorporates policy priorities from every member of this committee, as well as input from stakeholders provided at hearings, including Mr. Whitehair, who came from West Virginia. I'm pleased to co-sponsor this bill with Chairman Carper, Senator Kelly, and Senator Kramer. Today, we also will be considering S3791, the America's Conservation Enhancement Reauthorization Act. The ACE Act helps conserve wildlife and wildlife habitat. Specifically, it reauthorizes the North American Wetlands Conservation Act, the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation Establishment Act, as the chairman mentioned, and the Chesapeake Bay Program. The Chesapeake Bay Program supports conservation and habitat restoration efforts in the Chesapeake Bay, which will help to boost West Virginia and many of the members of this committee's outdoor recreation industry, especially in my eastern panhandle. The legislation also protects livestock from predators and combats invasive species. I was pleased to co-sponsor this bill with Chairman Carper and many of our colleagues on the committee. And lastly, we will consider 3858, the Legacy Mine Cleanup Act of 2024. As the chairman mentioned, a bipartisan bill by Senator Kelly and Senator Lummis. This bill will codify the EPA agency office that coordinates cleanup of legacy mining sites on tribal land, some of which provided uranium to support our nation's national security throughout the Cold War. The federal government shares the responsibility in remediating these old sites. Just last week, the EPA added an abandoned uranium mine site located on Navajo Nation to the Superfund National Priorities List. I look forward to continuing to collaborate on this issue while we work to get our bipartisan nuclear energy bill, the ADVANCE Act, signed into law. I urge my colleagues to support
From your lips to God's ears.
all of these three bipartisan bills. Thank you.
I just say to our visitors from West Virginia, this is the only committee in the Senate where the senior Democrat and the senior Republican are West Virginia natives. And it seems to work pretty well here. May want to try it in some other committees. All right. Well, I believe we have a quorum present. Thank everybody for coming and being so punctual. Before we begin, I would ask senators to hold comments on bills and amendments until after the voting is completed, if you would, please. First, I want to call up S. 3891, the Economic Development Reauthorization Act of 2024, and an amendment in the nature of a substitute to this legislation, Carper Capito number 1. The amendment in the nature of a substitute makes several technical changes agreed to on a bipartisan basis in it. As the ranking member and I have agreed, I ask unanimous consent to use this amendment in the nature of a substitute as the base text for the purpose of this business meeting. Is there objection? Hearing no objection, committee will now use Carper Capito amendment in the nature of substitute as the base text for the purposes of the committee's action on the Economic Development Reauthorization Act of 2024. Now I'd like to recognize I'd like to ask unanimous consent to call up Cardin Amendment number 1 as modified. This amendment includes updating economic development plans to align with other state, regional, or local plans as an eligible type of administrative expense under Section 203 of the Public Works and Economic Development Act of 1965. Does anyone wish to speak on the Cardin Amendment? Senator Cardin.
Let me thank the chair and ranking member. This will coordinate planning under the EDA grants, and I thank you for working with us to modify this amendment so it could be accepted, and I would ask for its approval.
Great. Thanks so much. Thanks for your work on this, you and your team. Any other senators would like to comment on the Cardin Amendment? All right, seeing no further speakers, the question is on approving the amendment. If there are no objections, we will proceed to a voice vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. The amendment is adopted. Now I would like to ask unanimous consent to call up the Merkley Amendment Number 2 as modified. The amendment modifies a GAO study in the base bill and has also been agreed to on a bipartisan basis. Does anyone wish to speak on Senator Merkley's amendment? Senator Merkley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is aimed at getting recommendations for improving the timely disbursement of grants. Everyone who has found that organizations in their state have gotten EDA grants and then they're not timely dispersed knows that this has been an issue, so we need to find some solutions.
And thank you for a solution. Are there other speakers on the amendment from Senator Merkley? Anyone else? All right. Seeing or hearing no further speakers, the question is on approving his amendment. If there are no objections, we'll proceed to a voice vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. We have one nay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, though. The amendment is adopted. Does any other senator wish to offer any additional amendments to this legislation? All right. In that case, I think we can proceed to a vote on reporting the bill. If there are no further amendments, I move that the committee report favorably S 3891, the Economic Development Reauthorization Act of 2024 with amendments in the nature of a substitute. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. This legislation is favorably reported. I note for the record the quorum of the committee is present. We'll now consider S 3791, the ACE Act. First, I call up an amendment in the nature of substitute to this legislation, Carper Capito Number 1. The amendment in the nature of substitute makes several technical changes agreed to on a bipartisan basis. As the ranking member and I have agreed, I ask unanimous consent to use this amendment in the nature of a substitute as a base text for the purpose of the business meeting. Is there objection? Hearing none. The committee will now use the Carper Capito Amendment in the nature of a substitute as a base text for the purpose of the committee's action on the ACE Act. Further, as no amendments were filed, I now move that the committee favorably report S 3791, the ACE Act, with an amendment in the nature of a substitute. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The legislation is favorably reported. I note for the record that a quorum of the committee is present. Finally, we turn to S 3858, the Legacy Mine Cleanup Act of 2024. Does any senator wish to offer an amendment to this legislation? Senator Sullivan here? I'm sorry?
Yeah, I call up Senator Sullivan's amendment.
Okay, sure. All right, Senator Sullivan's amendment has been called up by Senator Capito. And would you like to speak on?
I think it's a great amendment.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Well, effusive in her praise.
Yes.
yes,
Go ahead, Senator Lummis.
the amendment includes the Alaska Native Corporation in the coordination and consultations that are provided in this bill. I think it's a good amendment. Senator Kelly, do you agree? Yeah. This is a very worthwhile amendment. I support it.
All right. All right. I think on behalf of Senator Sullivan, I need to call up the Sullivan Amendment Number 1 to make a technical correction with respect to the Alaska Native Corporations. This amendment corrects a definition in the bill and has also been agreed to on a bipartisan basis. Any senator wish to speak on Senator Sullivan's amendment that is being offered on his behalf? Anyone else wish to speak on that amendment? Okay. Hearing none, no more speakers on the amendment. Seeing no more further speakers to speak, the question is on approving the amendment. If there are no objections, we'll proceed to a voice vote. Are there any objections? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is adopted. As there were no additional amendments filed, I move that the committee favorably report S 3858, the Legacy Mine Cleanup Act. All in favor say aye. All opposed say nay. If any of the chair, the ayes have it, the legislation is favorably reported. Then I note for the record that a quorum of the committee is present. That concludes the committee's votes for the business meeting today. Before we adjourn, I just want to say to our visitors from West Virginia and others who might be watching, this is democracy. This is the way it's supposed to work. The staffs that are gathered behind us on either side work for weeks, months to help make this day and this markup possible. I just want to express, on behalf of all of our senators, all our members, our thanks to our staff for the great work that you have done. And with that, I think, Ben? Okay. I'll now recognize members who'd like to speak on any of the amendments filed or items that we voted on today. Ben?
Mr. Chairman, first of all, I want to thank you and Senator Capito for the manner in which you have considered these bills. All three are extremely important. The reauthorization of EDA is something that we needed to get done, and I thank you for that. I want to talk about the American Conservation Enhancement Act because it includes reauthorizations of major programs in regards to Chesapeake Bay. And I want to thank you for that. The Chesapeake Bay program itself is reauthorized at $100 million annually, and I thank you for that. It shows our continued commitment, which we've seen in a bipartisan way for this program, which is a model program in our country. The federal participation is part of a local initiative program that has been very successful in dealing with the Chesapeake Bay, but there's a lot more work that needs to be done. And this reauthorization bill provides the predictability going forward, and I thank you for that. I also want to thank you for including the Chesapeake Watershed Investment for Landscape Defense, the WILD Act, which is authorized at $15 million a year. I appreciate that. It is the reauthorization of a program that's been very, very important under Fish and Wildlife. And of course, Chesapeake Bay Gateway and Water Trails Network is also reauthorized under this program. So I just really want to thank you on behalf of the Bay States, which include Delaware and West Virginia, for the continued commitment to the Chesapeake Bay.
Thank you, Senator Card, and for your leadership on this front, and many others for that matter. Senator Capito, anything you'd like to ask? Senator Lummis, please. Yeah.
Well, I just had a question. In one of the amendments, there was a provision for the Black Vulture and permits and Farm Bureau. I'm just curious about what that's about.
My knowledge of that is that that is a concern that was brought to us from Senator Mullen as predatory birds that are attacking young livestock, and the provision that is in there is to give them some more flexibility to be able to address this issue that is critical to him and probably others in the Midwest states.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. You know, this time of year, we're lambing in the West, and you'll find baby lambs hanging from trees where dead baby lambs, because the raptors will pick them up and take them up in the trees and eat them, and it's tough lambing in the West. So thank you for that.
Any other speakers?
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Kelly, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to take a moment to thank you and Senator Capito for all the hard work that went into this markup. And I'm pleased that one of the bipartisan bills that just passed this committee was my Legacy Mine Cleanup Act, which I introduced with Senator Lummis. Our bipartisan bill takes another step forward to cleaning up abandoned and inactive mines throughout the western United States by permanently authorizing the EPA's Office of Mountains, Deserts, and Plains. Mr. Chairman, there's more than 100,000 abandoned hard rock mines in the western U.S. These abandoned mines can often create health and safety risks for nearby communities, but often the federal bureaucracy gets in the way of cleaning them up. For example, there are more than 500 abandoned uranium mines on the Navajo Nation, but very few mines have been cleaned up to date. This bipartisan legislation seeks to change that by authorizing an office at EPA specifically focused on these problems, like abandoned mines. And this office would create a priority cleanup list of abandoned mines in the western U.S., support research and development to find new ways to clean up abandoned mines, and provide more assistance specifically to tribal communities. And I'm thankful to my colleagues for joining me in supporting this legislation, which takes one more step towards cutting through the red tape and addressing an important issue to communities in Arizona and throughout the West. I'm also glad that our committee overwhelmingly passed the Economic Development Reauthorization Act. As chair of the Transportation Infrastructure Subcommittee, it was a privilege to work with Senator Carper, Capito, and Kramer to negotiate this legislation that reauthorizes the EDA for the first time in more than a decade. In working on this legislation, my priorities were making sure that Arizona's rural and tribal communities got the assistance they needed to boost their economies, and that we equipped EDA with the tools it needs to support industries of the future. In particular, I'm particularly pleased that this includes my bipartisan bill, the Onshore Act, which establishes a new site development program at EDA to help communities across the country develop shovel-ready sites. This will help communities in every corner of our country grow their economies and attract new investments from semiconductor manufacturing, critical mineral processing, biotech investments, and more. Equally important, our bill authorizes a new workforce training program to help communities train workers for these advanced manufacturing jobs of the future. I'm also glad that EDA, the Reauth bill, includes key provisions from legislation I introduced with Senator Cortez Masto called the Invest in Our Communities Act. This includes a proposal to create an Office of Tribal Economic Development, and our proposal to allow EDA to invest in projects that support travel, tourism, or outdoor recreation industries. I'm also pleased that this bill permanently authorizes the Assistance to Coals Community Program. And then lastly, I'm pleased that we expand and authorize the Southwest Border Regional Commission, which supports communities in Arizona throughout the southwestern United States. So, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Capito, thank you so much for all the hard work that went into this.
You've accomplished a lot, you and your team, and we're happy to be able to move that along. Any other members of our committee like to speak on a filed amendment or on any other item that we've discussed today? Senator Lemons? No. No. Madam Chair?
We're good.
Okay. All right, with that, in closing, again, I want to thank everyone, particularly our staffs, both sides, majority, minority, and the staff of each of the members of this committee. I have, I think, 3 unanimous consent agreements. First, I ask unanimous consent for members to submit their statements for the record on the legislation we have considered today without objection. Second, I would like to ask unanimous consent to submit for the record a number of letters of support for the legislation our committee has approved today without objection. And I would also ask unanimous consent that staff have authority to make technical and conforming changes in the legislation approved today and without objection. I feel especially good about reauthorizing the Economic Development Administration for first time in 20 years, and to make real improvements to that. And we can feel good about all the items that we've taken up on today's day's agenda, but I feel especially encouraged by that. Sometimes people, I go home almost every night to Delaware and talk to people on the train coming and going, and people sometimes will say, why don't you guys ever work together? Can't you find any way to work together? And I just wish all those people, those doubting Thomases, had the opportunity to be in this room and be a part of this markup today. I think they would be encouraged by the state of our democracy. Any more comments? Senator Capito, my thanks to you and your team and our team as well. Thanks, everybody. With that, we're adjourned. Thank you.